Good evening and welcome to the second in a series of 3 shows that we are doing with candidates for office for the November 4th elections, brought to you by Cayuga Community College and The Citizen. I'm your moderator, Guy Cosentino. The 126th Assembly District is up this November 4th for a 2-year term for service in Albany. It has a base salary of roughly $79,000. The 126th Assembly District includes all of Auburn, parts of Cayuga County, as well as parts of Shenango, Onondaga, and Cortland counties. Jeremy Boyer, the executive editor of The Citizen, is here as he normally is to ask questions of our candidates. Many of you know him from his weekly column in The Citizen that runs on Thursdays. We have both candidates who are running this year for that race. Our candidates in the order of their appearance, opening statements, and that'll be reversed at the end, are Diane Dwire, who is on the Democratic and Working Families lines, as well as the incumbent Gary D. Finch, who is on the Republican, Conservative, and Independence lines. I want to welcome you both into the studio. Delighted to have you here to do this. Prior to taping, we took bingo chips and figured out who was going to go first, and then we'll reverse that at the end. You're going to have a 2-minute opening statement, and then Mr. Boyer will go with his questions, and we'll go from there. And so we'll start with Diane Dwire, who is on the Democratic and Working Families line. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. To start, I'd really like to thank the Cayuga County Community College for hosting this event, the moderator for being here to make sure the event goes off smoothly, and Mr. Boyer. Also, I think it's wonderful to have the students practicing their profession that they will use when they do graduate and get out into the business world. I'm Diane Dwire. I'm a nurse. I'm an Army veteran. I've served on active duty and in the reserves. After 20 years in the military, actually more than 20 years, I retired as a lieutenant colonel from the Army Nurse Corps. I was born and raised in the Camillus, in the village of Camillus. Central New York has been my home for most of my life. My grandparents, I'm very proud, my grandparents came over from the old country and they worked in the Camillus cutlery. They were very hard workers. And my parents also did the same. They were here, they were hard workers. My father was a tool and die man. I learned my work ethic from my parents. And as I said, I'm very proud of that. I did go to Niagara University where I received my bachelor's in nursing. And that's where I basically joined the student nursing program that paid for my education. One of the things that I really like to talk about a little bit is that I believe for so long upstate New York really has been a little bit overlooked. And when I go to Albany, I will go there with a strong voice. I will be the advocate for the Central New York area. I will bring up the priorities that the people in this area like. The priorities are they want to see job growth, they want to see economic development, they want to see their drinking water protected. We want to see equal funding for our schools, and we want equal pay for equal work. As I have gone around and knocked now on close to 3,300 doors, these are the priorities people have told me that they want me to take to Albany. I will take them to Albany. I will be the new energy. I will have the fresh blood, and I will represent Central New York in Albany. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now have a 2-minute opening statement from the incumbent, Gary D. Finch, who's on the Republican, Conservative, and Independence lines. Mr. Finch.
Thank you, Guy. First of all, I too would like to thank The Citizen for sponsoring this, as well as Cayuga Community College, providing the site and the equipment. It's so important that we reach out to the community, and this is one of the ways that we can do it. I am the current member of the Assembly. I represent the 126th Assembly District, the district that's right in the heart of the Finger Lakes. Actually, 4 of our Finger Lakes are right within this district. Serving in the Assembly, and I found this to be very, very important. It's a multifaceted job. Not only do you spend time in Albany reviewing legislation, debating legislation, writing legislation, you also have a large constituent base that you need to serve. And I really feel that we do that best. The base itself, people call us when they have no more hope to get any assistance from anywhere else. working with the state, working with the agencies, finding a door closed when you can open one for members who are seeking help. We do that very, very well. We have 3 people in our office that that's their main job, is to follow constituents. And the third aspect of the job is advocacy. Advocacy on behalf of the district itself, the issues that face the district, whether it's lake quality issues, whether it's job creation, whether it's helping companies seek grants or get through a maze of paperwork that's very complex. That's really what I see my role as. Being an advocate on behalf of the people I represent, not necessarily being an advocate in Albany, taking back information, but bringing it forth from the grassroots.
Thank you, Assemblyman. We'll now have questions over the next 50 minutes from Mr. Boyer. He can ask them of either of you or both of you individually. He will be allowed follow-ups, as we talked about at the beginning. Mike, who is a student here in telecommunications, he's going to be timing you. He'll hold up a sign when you have 1 minute left and then flash it when it's 2. If you'd like to rebut, just look over here and we'll give you a 1 minute rebuttal. And you'll be both will be allowed 1 each on those questions unless it gets really interesting. And that's my call. So, Mr. Boyer, welcome.
Thank you, and thanks for both of you for coming here today and taking part in this forum. Going to try to cover as many topics as we can get to today in an hour. So we'll start in the area of the environment, and specifically the debate over fracking in New York State. I'm going to put the question to both candidates this way, because we've heard a lot of politicians in the last couple of years, when it comes to fracking, say, I support it if it can be done safely. And of course, that's the big question, if it can be done safely. So my question is, based on what we all know right now, do you feel that it can be done safely, and should we move forward with it?
And
fracking in New York State, yes.
Candidates, since Mr. Dwyer went first, we'll start with Mr. Finch for 2 minutes on hydrofracking.
Can it be done safely at this moment is a question. I don't believe it can be. I don't think we have an understanding of the material that they use to frack. And we're talking about lateral fracking, which is different than the vertical fracking that we do right now in New York State, which is done with water. And this is just simply being done in Pennsylvania. I don't think we know enough about it. Right now, the DEC is reviewing the regulations. They're supposed to release them. I don't know when. They were supposed to release them 6 months ago. Prior to that, even earlier. So at this point, I would say no. That we simply don't know enough about it. But what we do know, there are problems in Pennsylvania. The regulations have been very loose down there. There's a lot of what I would call wildcatting going on. The environment has been damaged, and the whole site where they treat the material, the fracking material, they haven't got a proper way of treating that as well. So the answer is absolutely no, and under no circumstances should it ever be done in the watershed of our fresh water, the Finger Lakes.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Mr. Dwyer, you have 2 minutes on this issue of hydrofracking.
Well, I would definitely have supported the moratorium on the ban, the moratorium on preventing hydrofracking in our area in New York State, until we actually have the full study to know the potential harmful effects of hydrofracking. I'm very concerned of what the effect would be on the families and what it would be on our community and our drinking water. That is one of our most valuable natural resources. My opponent here has really voted 3 times against a hydrofracking moratorium that would just wait until we had the facts. And we need those facts. I think we do, as I said, the full study is not in. We need to continue to study to get all the results from the health study that has not been reported out yet from the New York State Health Department. And before we make any movement forward, we cannot afford to risk our natural resource. It's one of our most valuable ones. If we do not have clean water here in New York State, in central New York, the tourism and the agricultural industry will dry up, and we just cannot allow that to happen. If I am elected and I go to Albany, one of the first things I will do would be to introduce legislation that would protect the 5 Finger Lakes, which provide drinking water for 1.5 5 million people in the central New York area. We must protect our water and our environment.
Thank you. You'll have 1 minute to respond.
I'd like to comment on the 3 no votes on the moratorium. I serve on the Conservation Committee. Those bills, when they came out, were flawed bills. They never actually became law, although it appears in a recent mailing that they did. They were flawed because, number one, it would have eliminated any fracking in New York State, and there is a distinction between the type of fracking that is done in Pennsylvania with the lateral damage, the lateral fracking and fracking fluid, and the fracking that's been going on in New York for 100 years. Those gas wells that we see around, all around where we live, they would have put them out of business if they had to be refracked, which is a very important quality about, you have to refract wells every once in a while. In addition to that, you frack them with water here, no special detergents in it. It would have put well drilling and fracking completely out of business in New York State, and we've been doing it safely. It's an entire different kind of fracking that goes on in Pennsylvania. It never became law. It was flawed. That's as simple as that.
Mr. Dwire, you'll have 1 minute, and then we'll move on to Mr. Boyer.
Okay. One point is that, first of all, once again, the moratorium was to protect until we found out the facts. But also, it is my understanding that that was only to be regulating and controlling future, not all of the different hydrofracking and gas exploration that we are doing now. So that I have a concern on that. That it would not have affected what was already being done. It was only for the future.
Mr. Boyer.
We'll stick with environmental stuff for one more question at least, and that's in our, right here in Auburn and in this immediate area, the Owasco Lake watershed and the water quality. There, we've seen a pretty substantial blue-green algae bloom this year as well as the last 2 years, and it's generating a lot of discussion about farming regulations and how much farm runoff is contributing to that, some of the problems in the lake. So my question is, you know, in New York State, do we have to have tighter regulations, heavier fines, more monitoring, or a combination of all 3 of those, or is farming being unfairly blamed for some of these problems as well?
And this is for both candidates.
Yes.
We'll start with Ms. Dwire.
You make some very good points, regulations and code enforcement and monitoring. Currently, regulations seem to be in place through the DEC. We need to have more code enforcements. We need to have more monitoring so there can be enforcement. And I believe the farmers have to also, we have to incorporate more education. Many times if you're out there monitoring, you're going to be assessing the situation. You'll be talking to the owner, the farmer, and you'll realize that person should have the skills and abilities to determine whether we need to step back and do some education so we don't have some of that runoff. If in the process we find out that there are stronger regulations need to be implemented, then I think we need to do that. But the first step would be to look at monitoring, look at the education that is needed by the owner, and also the ability of the code enforcements to function and to be able to function, and which of the penalties should be applied.
Thank you. Mr. Finch, you'll have 2 minutes on this issue of farm runoff in Owasco Lake.
Well, all the lakes in central New York are in jeopardy. All 10 Finger Lakes are. And we should be concerned about them because we actually get our drinking water from them. They're not what they were 40 years ago or 30 years ago when we were kids and we were swimming in that lake, or all the lakes. We've had the introduction of zebra mussels and razor clams. Hydrofoil is in the lakes as well. The growth is there. And yes, we have farm runoff as well. That's a factor. Now we come to the center of the crux of the matter is, how do we balance our large agricultural industry, which is so important to us, and save and make sure the lakes are taken care of properly. At times there are opposite feelings about exactly how we're going to work this. But agricultural business is number one in the county, and preserving our lakes is certainly important. What I've tried to do is bring both parties together. The agricultural community with Farm Bureau and Ray Lockwood as its president, and Charlie Green with Aula Association, and they have been talking now for like 2.5 years, somehow working out what needs to be done and what balances need to be there. Senator Seward and myself recently were able to provide over $220,000 worth of money brought back to this county for soil and water to remediate Dutch Hollow Creek. 20% of the inflow of the lake water comes from Dutch Hollow. This was very, very important, but it couldn't have happened without Ray Lockwood and Charlie Green talking about what could be done. Because in order to be able to remediate that creek, you have farmland on both sides. This was the first, I believe, the first time any remediation has been done in any of the lakes just recently, right now. And so I think that has been a very important step in the process of saving this lake.
Thank you,
Frankly, I
Assemblyman.
want to be here to work on it further.
Thank you, Assemblyman.
Okay.
Mr. Boyer.
We'll move on to a totally different topic. When we go to something that's been pretty controversial the last 2 or 3 years, that's the SAFE, I guess it's 2 years, the SAFE Act that the state legislature approved, increasing restrictions on firearms in New York State. And want to know how you both feel about that piece of legislation, whether it was appropriate and if anything should be changed about it going forward.
Assemblyman Finch, you go first. You have 2 minutes on this.
I can be much simpler than that. I opposed the SAFE Act when it was presented. It was a knee-jerk reaction to that terrible tragedy that happened in Newtown. I opposed it. I voted against it. I'm co-sponsoring legislation to repeal it, and which is, quite frankly, a little unlikely, but still it's there. And perhaps it needs to be tweaked a bit, at least. The number of shells in the chamber needs to be increased so it makes everything compatible. So I opposed it and will continue to do so.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Ms. Dwyer, on the issue of the SAFE Act.
Yes. Well, first of all, I really want to say that I support the rights of responsible gun owners. In the Army, even as an Army nurse, I had to qualify on a .45 and the M16 machine gun. So I'm familiar with weapons. They do not scare me. I'm, like I said, we had to qualify. As far as the SAFE Act goes, I do believe the increased penalties for those people that kill first responders, I do agree with that. I agree with the universal background checks. And I agree with the enhanced enforcement that we have now to protect survivors of domestic violence. I think those are areas that are very, very important. But there definitely is the one flaw. With 7 bullets in a magazine, that needs to be changed. I will support legislation when in Albany to amend that law.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer.
Just a follow-up question to that. Another provision was the mental health provision of the SAFE Act, and wondered how you both feel about that.
And we'll reverse that. Ms. Dwyer will go first.
It is one of the areas, as I said, I wanted to say is when I went to Albany, I would really work to amend and support legislation that would amend the law regarding the 7 bullets. But one of the issues and concerns that I've had very much is with the fact that over time, the mental health services in New York State has decreased. And I say that as a nurse. I've seen soldiers that come back from Iraq, I've seen Desert Storm. That is one thing, but just looking at the whole mental health the whole mental health services in New York State, they have decreased, and we really need to take a serious look at that. We have to look at the mental health. We have to increase some of those services. We have people out there that need help, and we really want to make sure that guns do not fall into hands of people that have some severe mental illness.
Thank you. Mr. Finch, 2 minutes on the issue of mental health. And
Probably the most grievous part of that piece of legislation was that mental health component. It allows for a healthcare provider, not necessarily a psychiatrist, but a psychologist, when interviewing a client or a patient, if you will, if there's any indication that that person could be of a danger to himself or to someone else, they are required to report it. And through that process, the person's firearms can be seized. They will be they'll be slotted, I guess, for the rest of their life. They may never get the firearm back. And it's just between the healthcare professional and the FBI or the police agency. What should have been done is they should have had a panel of experts that would, including a judge, and psychiatrists to analyze where that patient is coming from. That would be very important. Number one, important. The second aspect is no one's going to go to their healthcare provider and share with them that they are having mental issues or they're depressed because they've had a death in the family or whatever. And so in the way it's worded, actually prevents people from stepping forward. They're afraid and frightened to. There should have been another way to do it, and that was wrong too. And it would have been done right if it had not been done so quickly. A message from the governor on the floor for a vote, not very much debate, and we're law days later. Another example of doing too much too soon in response to an issue, a very important one, and once again we've not handled it right.
Ms. Dwire, you'll have 1 minute as response.
I just want to take, in the military, I had the opportunity, I worked on the psych unit. So I've worked with people that have had different types of neuroses and psychoses. And I really have a lot of respect for the psychiatrist and a psychologist in New York State. They're PhDs, so they're not somebody that's just getting a simple degree. These are qualified people, and I have a lot of faith in that system that they can have the ability, that is their job, to determine the difference between someone who is going to be endangering others or of danger to themselves. So I would think we certainly need to look at all the flaws, and we need to look at any of the other ramifications in the law that may need to be changed or amended. But once again, when we had the shootings in the schools, it was with people that had mental illness. It were not criminals. It was people with mental illness that killed our children, and we do need to take that very seriously.
Okay, Mr. Boyer.
Okay, we'll move on to education, and a big topic in New York State, of course, has been the Common Core learning standards. And I think in hearing from both of you in this campaign, you've both agreed that New York State's implementation of the Common Core at the outset was flawed. So the question really is, what do we do now? How do we go forward? Should we be scrapping Common Core altogether, or is there some other changes that we should be making to what's going on with it?
We'll start with Mr. Finch. You'll have 2 minutes on Common Core.
There's no question that the implementation of Common Core was flawed. And one of the main components, one of the main reasons that it was so flawed is the state of New York tied the evaluation of the teacher to that person's success in teaching the Common Core. It immediately set up a problem that was something that should not have ever happened. No, evaluations are done when you evaluate an employee, it's for the benefit of the employee to improve, and you don't share it with everybody in the community. This allowed that whole process to be shared with the parents, who would clearly share that with their children, and it became a problem. That was one thing that was wrong with it. I stood up in the Assembly chamber and debated against this and said it was wrong to do before we even did it, but it went forward. We definitely need to raise our standards in New York State. It's very, very important. I've been talking about it for a long, long time. And then when the Common Core was first discussed, I quite frankly thought we were on the right track. You know, and I still think we are. But we've got to find a way to implement it better. We've got to find a way to get instructional mentors into our schools, paid for by the state of New York, not by the school districts, to make sure our teachers are teaching the core in the appropriate way. That's one thing we must do. We must find a way to raise our standards. We have to compete in the world. We have to compete. We're 27th in math skills. and we're 35th in reading our skills across the globe. The greatest country in the world, and we're falling behind. We need to maintain that level, and this is a way we need to do it. It's so important to raise those standards. Our children are like sponges in the sense they can suck up information, and that's what we should be taking advantage of. We're losing and we're falling behind. We must do something.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Ms. Dwire, you'll have 2 minutes on Common Core.
Yes. The Common Core was implemented way too fast. We needed to slow down. We needed to look at it. I think one of the things that we all want is that our children to have the best education possible. And in order to do that, I was talking to people when I went door to door, once again, teachers, parents, administrators, and all of them believed that there needed to be a standard. No one disagreed that there shouldn't be a standard for education and that we shouldn't have evaluations. But the rapidity in which it was implemented is a major concern for them. We need to slow down. Our teachers need an opportunity to really know the curriculum, look at how they would introduce it. These are educated people. They have their masters. They know how to teach. We need to make sure our teachers have the resources they need, the learning tools to teach our children. Our children need to have the opportunity to adjust to the new curriculum. Once again, I think it is the most important thing that we work to make sure our children are educated to the best possible way we can and have the best possible education.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer.
Okay, I'm going to move on to some questions for specific for each of you individually. Start for Ms. Dwire. If you do win this election, you'll go to Albany, and unlike Mr. Finch, you'll have a chance to vote. Well, he can vote, but he's not in the Democratic majority of who will be the speaker, and that's been Sheldon Silver for quite some time now. My question for you is, would you support returning him as speaker if you are elected to go represent us in Albany, and why or why not?
When I go to Albany, I plan to take my priorities there, which is job growth, economic development, lowering taxes, equal pay for equal work, protecting our drinking water. Those are my priorities. When I go to Albany and we come to that point of making a decision, I'll make an informed decision on who the speaker will be, and I will vote for the person that I feel will help me represent Central New York and help me bring the funding that is needed and that we deserve here in Central New York.
I know these questions are for both, so if it's not for you, you'll have 1 minute to respond, not 2 minutes. So you'll have 1 minute, Mr. Finch. If you want to add anything to this.
No.
Okay. Your next question.
Well, and as a follow-up to that, one of the...
Well, hold on.
Okay.
Do I get the same question?
No, but you can follow up on what she had just said if you have anything you want to add in a minute.
Oh, I understand. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Misunderstood.
It's rare when we get one individual
It is.
question.
It's probably taken us 2 minutes to discuss that. Actually, what I will bring to Albany is an independent voice. Simple as that. I will speak independently. I owe no one anything for my election. I have not accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars of TV time or anything else. The bottom line is, my opponent here has accepted enormous amount of money from Sheldon Silver through his PAC, and that's where her allegiance will be. Another person to march in line step with the speaker.
Thank you. You will have 1 minute. And
I do.
You do have 1 minute, and then we'll move
just
on.
get that straight. Well, first of all, without a doubt, I have a voice, and I'm an advocate, and I'm an independent person. Also, I must say that as the Republican Party, the New York State Republican Party has supported some of the mailings, and my opponent, the Democratic Party, has also supported me. As I said, I will make an informed decision. I will represent the people in New York State, in Central New York, and I have been known to be an independent voice, and I will continue to be one.
Mr. Boyer.
One more follow-up on Shelley Silver. Because one of the things that happened in the past year was his handling of sexual harassment cases in the Assembly, and specifically using taxpayer-funded legal counsel to try to get the case resolved and keep it quiet. From your vantage point, how do you feel about how he handled that whole situation?
And is that just for Ms. Dwire or is that for both?
I actually think that's for both candidates. But
So we're going to flip. Mr. Finch first, then Ms. Dwire.
Well, I guess I'll just say, to begin with, I have witnessed the result of someone opposing Shelley Silver. It happened with Michael Bragman. It happened just last cycle when an individual from the Buffalo area stood up and opposed him, a member of his conference. He was gone. He was gone in less than a year. It's amazing to think that Shelley Silver paid enormous amounts of money in the neighborhood of $700,000 to deal with the Lopez incidents and the sexual harassment in the assembly. Mr. Silver believes and touts the fact that he supports women's issues. He's out there, and then he turns around and tries to cover up Lopez's sexual harassment and multiple sexual harassments over the years, just not this most recent one. Boxley, his chief counsel, was arrested in the chamber, right in the assembly floor by the state police for a sexual harassment a few years ago, and it's always been covered up. Not a week goes by when there's corruption in Albany. The number one thing we should be doing is raising the ethics standard in Albany. We should find a way. I support the ethical bill that Leader Kolb has out there right now. I co-sponsor it, and the fact that you absolutely must have a transparent way of raising money so we all know where the money comes from for our campaigns. Those who have committed sexual harassment and have been arrested for it, they should lose their pension, absolutely, and they should go to jail. Those are some of the things we should be doing. What we should be doing, we are role models for the students and everyone in the state. What we must do is hold ourselves to a higher standard, even higher than the toughest ethics bill that Leader Kolb is advocating right now. We should hold ourselves higher. You deserve it.
Thank you. Mr. Dwire, you have 2 minutes on this issue of the settlement on Vito Lopez.
Yes, and I think what we're really talking about here is the trust in government. I have zero tolerance for any elected official that abuses his position for personal gain. I think any public official that violates the law should be fully prosecuted. And if they are convicted, they should lose their taxpayer-funded salary and any benefits that they would be receiving. That is a given. That shouldn't be. I often say, I am a nurse. I have a license. If I violate the law to the degrees that we're talking about, I would lose my license. I would not be able to work for the rest of my life in my profession. And I think our elected officials should be held to the same standard. But I think there's also another way that we can look at building the trust in our government. One of the things is equal pay for equal work. I think once again, if we could turn around and maybe pass this might be a beginning to let people know that government is on their side, that we do feel that women should be paid equally, and little by little, we would begin to build the trust of people in our government.
All right, thank you. We just wanted to tell viewers that we're about a little over halfway through the forum for the 126th Assembly District. We have in the studio with us both candidates running for that office, Diane Dwire, who is on the Democratic and Working Families line, as well as the incumbent Assemblyman Gary D. Finch, who is on the Republican, Conservative, and Independence lines. They are sitting in the order that they drew straws for opening statements, and we'll reverse that on the end. They're being asked questions by Jeremy Boyer, the executive editor of The Citizen. Mr. Boyer.
Okay, thanks. Equal pay has been a big issue in this campaign, I understand. I get my mailbox filled with materials every day, it seems, and that's been a topic I've seen a lot. I'm going to start with a question for Mr. Finch because we did ask and we received the list of 19 bills that you voted on since 2002 on related to equal pay, and not all of them were lumped into the way they were in the most recent version with an abortion provision. So my question, I guess, for you is, as far as your voting record goes on equal pay, could you explain that record and where you why you stand the way you stand now versus where maybe you were in the past?
I don't think there's a real conflict from where I was in the past or where I am now. I've always believed in equal pay for equal work, always. I support the 9 bills of the Women's Equality Act, which includes not only equal pay for equal work, less discrimination in the workplace in regard to pregnancy, stronger legislation in regard to the orders of protection, as well as related to human trafficking issues. All of those I support, all 9 of those. What I can't support, because I can't deal with it with my conscience, and that's the reason. It's a conscience, is a late-term abortion. The concept of just simply codifying Roe v. Wade, it's more than that. It's much more than that. It's allowing an abortion to take place right up till the last moment before birth is hard to deal with for me personally. So therefore, I can't go with that whole package, the whole women's equality package. If the Speaker simply separated those bills, allowed each member of the Assembly to vote on them, they would be law. Already the state Senate has approved 9 of them. Why hasn't the Speaker done that? I'll tell you why. Because he knows there are a number of us out there that simply can't support that late-term abortion. So he's put us in a bit of a box so we can discuss it at a moment like this. So it becomes an issue for the election. So basically the Speaker is depriving those bills to be passed and come into law simply to put members of the Republican conference and some members of his own conference at risk. Frankly, I think people see through that. And all I'm looking for is respect for my view from conscience level, and also let's take these bills, split them apart, and let's have them become law. And it can be done January 1st, right after they all vote for the Speaker, and I guess we probably know who it's going to be, Sheldon Silver.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Because this was for Assemblyman Finch, you will have 1 minute to respond on this, just as we did with your question.
It's only for him?
That was only for him, am I correct?
We have some more questions. So
Oh, okay, I was going to say I didn't.
You're all going to get a bite at the apple, something tells me.
All right.
So you have 1 minute on this issue of the 19 reconciling the
Exactly.
record. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Yes, I have been a women's advocate for all of my life. The fact that we are still dealing with the issue of equal pay for equal work after 40 years, this issue has been going on. This is unconscionable and unbelievable. My opponent still voted 19 times for bills that would have ensured equal pay for equal work. That needs to be done. I will support that. The Women's Equality Act has 10 points. I fully support the 10 points. The one point that my opponent talks about, he's just misleading people. It is a distortion. I have read the language in that bill, and it basically says, all that it actually says is that New York State will incorporate existing federal law.
as a follow-up to that, I mean, what about the point of, what does that have to do with equal pay, with other issues? Why can't we vote on those items as individual items and get 9 of them passed?
You asking me?
Yeah, that's just for Ms.
Is it for
Dwire?
me?
Okay, so you get 2 minutes on that.
As I said, I support the whole 10 points, the one package, because over the years we've had, let me see, I think it was since 2002 that we could have voted on different legislation that would have given equal pay for equal work. We've had legislation that has dealt with domestic violence, human trafficking. They've had the opportunity to vote on these individuals. How interesting is it now when a package of 10 are presented, which once again only places the language of the federal government of Roe v. Wade in our law, the existing language. So they've had that opportunity. We need to pass all 10 points of the Women's Equality Act.
Mr. Finch, you'll have 1 minute on this additionally.
I think I explained my position, and I think it was clear. I'm not sure your question was answered by Ms. Dwyer or not, but I think you know where I stand on this issue.
Okay.
Mr. Boyer.
All right. Another question for the Assemblyman. Getting back to the issue of who's in control of the Assembly. You know, as a minority Assembly member, it could be argued that you don't have as much clout or power as someone that's in the majority. So what do you say to people that might argue we'd be better off having a member of the majority representing us?
Mr. Finch will have 2 minutes on this. Mr. Dwyer will have 1 minute to respond.
I would say my role is not to go down to Albany and involve myself with bringing a lot of what they call bacon home or pork home to the district. My role is to go down there and be an advocate on behalf of the people I represent, and bring issues forward from the district, the 126th. In addition to that, I am an independent voice, and I think that's what people want and expect. They don't want someone to go to Albany and to march in line with Shelley Silver, and I'll tell you, I have a great viewpoint of how it works. Being in the minority gives you a very unique perspective of exactly where the majority members lie. And they lie and they vote as a block, they're told how to vote, and that's simply it, and you watch it all the time. It's so important to have someone to speak out on issues, someone that has the courage to do it, someone isn't going to be necessarily punished to do it, unless you might say, I'm being punished right now because they're using every dime they can come together to see that I'm not reelected. It's really not going to work. I think the people in the upstate New York area, central New York, understand that. Somehow I've become a target. You know why? Because I have an open and free voice that represents the people where I live.
Mr. Dwyer, you'll have 1 minute.
Yes. I think I will have the ability to go to Albany and be an advocate for Central New York. My commercials have been telling my bio of who I am, what I will do, and I think from many of the commercials people get to realize who I am, and then I will meet with them and I will talk to them and I will listen to what their concerns are. And I will take that to Albany. And I will be an independent voice. I will also have the ability, to also bring back funding for this region that is desperately needed, because we need jobs, we need good paying jobs, long-lasting jobs, we need economic development. And that's what we need, and that's what I want to go to Albany to help out the Central New York region to have better economic development and growth.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer.
Okay. One question about something really in Cayuga County here, but I think New York State government does have a role, and that's the situation with the Cayuga Indian Nation in Union Springs. There's been a lot of upheaval recently down there over who's controlling the properties, but in addition, the Cayuga Nation has recently reopened its gaming facility, which could be in violation of state and local law, and there's been a lot of battles over taxes and sales taxes. So my question for both candidates related to that is, what should New York State be doing to help with this situation with the Cayuga Nation in Union Springs?
Okay, since the last question for both of you was first answered by Assemblyman Finch, Ms. Dwyer, you will answer the Cayuga Indian question first, and you have 2 minutes on that.
The Cayuga Indian Nation situation is definitely a complex situation. Now, I had the opportunity while I was working for the New York State Health Department as Regional Director of Prevent Services to also oversee the Indian Health Services for the 9 nations in New York State, from the Niagara Falls down to the end of Long Island. Dealing with the nations, this has been an ongoing problem. Now I'll tell you, it's been an ongoing situation. I saw Governor Pataki try to negotiate different settlements and treaties with the various Indian nations, with the Haudenosaunee, with the Akwesasnes, with the Oneidas, with the Senecas. That this is going to be settled in court. The Cayuga Nation is one of the nations that has an office here in Auburn, and it will be settled in the courts or in negotiation. I would love to see them have the opportunity to sit down and talk and work it out. But I've also, over the years, I've seen that we've had difficulties with this, and there's difficulties among the tribes, the Indian nations, and the different reservations. So I'm not sure if there is a good answer for this, but it will have to be decided.
Okay. Mr. Finch, you'll have 2 minutes on the issue of the Indian question in Cayuga County.
Well, the Native American issue in the county is certainly serious. It's been going on in New York State for over 200 years. It's been settled in the courts more times than I can count, and we thought it was resolved, and it's not been resolved. I met with the mayor of Union Springs a week or two ago, the supervisor in the town of Springport, spoken to David Gould, our sheriff, who seems to be the point person more than anyone, is able to at least sit down and talk with the tribes. There's an internal problem right now that within the Indian nation itself, it's very complex, and that's one reason why the gas station area has been closed down. The gaming area is left open. I don't quite understand that, but that seems to be the way it is. In yesterday's Citizen, I noticed there were 6 Native Americans that had been involved in a fight over the issue. So it's complex. I don't know if it's solvable in the courts. It's got to be some sort of negotiation somewhere. First, the nations themselves have to come to one mind. And then I think they need to deal with the federal government and the state government to be able to work this out. They are acquiring land in Springport and in Seneca County, and it comes off the tax rolls. The New York State then walks in and makes up the difference. Well, so everybody in New York State is now paying taxes on this land that they're acquiring. I think 80% of some of the towns are owned by the Native Americans. They aren't paying taxes on cigarettes. They should be taxing the vendor that's selling them the cigarettes rather than waiting for the government to step in. Very complex, extremely so, but they owe taxes. They owe the people of the state of New York, and the governor should direct the state police to go in there and just close them down. That's what should happen.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Ms. Boyer, or Mr. Boyer, I'm sorry.
Would you like to?
Did you, I'm sorry, I didn't see you signal. You have a minute.
No, I did. My one comment would be, when I was doing Indian health, I've seen some of the violence on the Indian nations, and it certainly concerns me. And that's why I'd have to say we really still need to try to meet with people, talk to the chiefs, the leadership of the different nations. Sending police in, I think, creates a very unhealthy situation. And once again, negotiation and talking, it's been going on for years, for years that I know. They've tried back in the 70s. But I would like to see it settled peacefully. Violence is not something we have enough violence in our society today. To add more to it would be, I think, unconscionable.
And I apologize for not seeing your hand signal. So.
Oh,
Mr. Boyer, you're going to have about 2 more questions.
Okay.
Make them count.
We'll do our best. The minimum wage is in the, I think, at the end of this year, it'll be the second in 3 phases of increasing the minimum wage in New York State. So it'll go to $8.75, and then in 2015, it'll go up to $9 per hour. My question for both candidates is, do you support where we stand with the minimum wage in New York State, or should it be increased, or should we have never passed the increase that we're currently in the midst of phasing in right now?
Mr. Finch, you'll have 2 minutes on this question.
Certainly minimum wage is, one does not earn enough to support a family on a minimum wage. There's no question about that. Whether New York State should be involved in determining the minimum wage or not, I think it should be a federal issue. It has in the past, and that's where it should come from. The minimum wage itself causes a problem for small businesses. It certainly should be. I could support it if there was an entry-level wage, perhaps for training purposes, and allowed businesses to bring laborers on and train them and move them up. At a time when the economy is not doing well, to raise the minimum wage, even though it looks very attractive to do that, is not the best time. I think it depresses the workforce coming in. The other aspect of it is what they call compression. You move the minimum wage up, and everything goes up. A rising tide raises all boats. So people above the minimum wage expect a wage as well to be increased. You have to be careful when you're doing this. You don't want to discourage job growth. But I understand that people need more money to live on as well. But it all has a factor. We were talking about there were people that were walking off their job a month ago and looking for a $15 an hour minimum wage. Well, can you imagine what the price of a hamburger at McDonald's would be if they had to do that? And that goes across the board. So we have to do it somehow to make sure people receive an adequate and fair wage to enter the job market, but not a point where they will be discouraged. Employers will be discouraged from hiring additional employees because all of a sudden now they have to pay a lot higher wages. It's really a difficult situation to deal with.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Ms. Dwire, the issue of minimum wage.
I would support the increase in minimum wage, and I would really support the increase, the early $9 this year instead of the end of next year. Our families are struggling here in New York State and in Central New York. Our working families, our single-parent families, they're worried about putting food and a roof over food on the table, a roof over their head. They have children, they have families. It certainly does not support a family of 4, where normally you would want to see at least 2 people working, but we really need to have a minimum wage. And I believe that an early increase in that would be very, very appropriate and would help the economy. I tend to think that New York State, I feel that we are fortunate, we're here, we're a leader in this country, not waiting for the federal government to tell us what the minimum wage should be. We know our economy, we know what our people need. Mr. Finch, I don't believe you've supported a minimum wage since it was $5.25. That's poverty level. We can't allow that. The $8 and the $9 that would go into effect at the end of December to 2015 should go in the beginning of this year. We need to help our families. We need to have this increase.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer, last question.
All right. We'll ask a question about ethics reform in Albany, which obviously has been an interesting issue in the past year or so. And I know kind of a sad commentary, really, but there's some reporters that cover the Capitol that actually have a counter that, how many days until the most recent arrest of a state legislator. So there's clearly been some major issues with corruption. My question for both of you is, do you support what has happened under Governor Cuomo's leadership in the past year with respect to the Moreland Commission and the formation of the Joint Commission on Public Ethics in terms of reforming Albany, or has that not been a process that's worked out well?
We're going to change a little bit on the timing to a minute and a half because we need to get out of here within 1 hour. So we're going to give you, Ms. Dwire, you're going to have a minute and a half. You have an hour now. A minute and a half, and
Really?
then the Assemblyman will have that as well.
Okay. I think I stated earlier, I really have a zero tolerance for any elected official that abuses his position and for personal gain. The Moreland Commission and the ethics, we need a strong ethics committee here. It has created a lot of discussion. We do not know the full story. I do not have all the facts. I have understood that some of the information that has been put out in the media is not exactly accurate, and that there is a report there that gives more definitive information, which I've not had the opportunity to read and explore. But I do believe that we need to have zero tolerance. I believe anybody that violates the laws here in New York State should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. If they are convicted, they should lose their salaries. And I think that would start to put trust back into our government and into our, that's it.
Thank you. Assemblyman Finch, on the issue of the Moreland Commission and Ethics, you have 1:45 seconds.
I really believe that those of us who are elected to the Assembly go down there for the right reasons. The majority of the members of that body are there because they want to represent the people that that elected them. And I honestly believe that, whether you're on the Republican side of the aisle or the Democratic side. That I think people go there. But power sometimes corrupts, and that's a problem. Money is a factor when it flows through. That becomes a problem as well. So I support the ethics issues that I spoke about earlier. There, I completely support them. They should be even stronger. The Moreland Commission, I was very gratified when Governor Cuomo actually initiated that commission, because I thought that was an attempt to sort of clean things up in Albany. Unfortunately, he closed it down. For whatever reason, it was closed down. It was unfortunate. It sent a very bad message to the people of New York State, as well as to the members of the Assembly and the Senate. That's too bad that that happened. I don't think we, the body, can really police itself. I think it needs to have some group to come in and set up an ethics board that actually sets those standards for all of us. And they must be separate from being appointed by the Speaker or the Majority Leader over in the Senate or the Governor. Somehow this has to come forth, and it needs to be done now.
Thank you, Assemblyman. I want to thank you both. First of all, we want to thank you for sticking to the answers to the questions, unlike last night's governor's debate where they kind of got sidetracked. We're now going to close out with 2-minute closing statements. As we discussed with the draws, we're going to go in reverse order. Assemblyman Finch will be closing first. He's on the Republican, Conservative, and Independence line. You have 2 minutes, sir.
We've reviewed a lot of issues here, important ones, ethics, education, the Common Core, the lake, the environment, all these things we've talked about. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about what I think is really one of the most important issues. It's job growth, job creation, maintaining an environment here that's going to be welcoming to businesses. Do we have, I've been watching the television, I've seen a number of ads. The one I kind of look at and wonder about more than anything else is New York is open for business, and yet we are not treating the people that exist in New York, running their business fairly. The agencies that supposedly help them, whether it's the ag and markets or labor or taxation and finance, they act like police agencies that come in and fine and rather than help our businesses to grow, help them surmount some hills that they're involved with, we don't do that. We create what I would call an unlevel playing field. We don't do anything to help retain our businesses, but we're talking about bringing businesses in. We are losing our job force, our trained, well-trained job force. They're going south. They're somewhere else. We need to maintain them, keep them here, and we need to find a way to grow business in New York. If we grow business, we have a healthy economy. That economy, in fact, will support not only the minimum wage, but a greater wage than that, which is very important. A wage that can pay for families, pay for their education. That's what we need to do. And business is what it's about, and we need to make a friendly place for business to come, and this state will thrive.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Ms. Dwire, who's on the Democratic and Working Families Party, you have 2 minutes to close as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to reiterate, one of the most important things, and I've said it several times, that will work for is job growth, economic development. We need to make sure that we encourage and that we are friendly and that people come into New York to start up businesses and stay here. I've really developed a plan where I feel that we can have local economic growth. The first part of that would be to have in Central New York to be more business friendly by providing incentives to businesses that come here and also agree to stay. By also supporting those businesses that have stayed here with us and have been loyal to us. Next, we need to upgrade our infrastructure. It is to have a smart investment. It would create jobs now and it would save money in the end. We need to reduce the unfunded mandates. By reducing the unfunded mandates, this would allow us to reduce our property tax, and this would give the tax relief to our homeowners, our businesses, and our farmers. We would also need to work very closely with our Chamber of Commerce. They are the people that know the businesses in the respective communities, and we can impact on the business districts. Long-lasting jobs, good paying jobs are what we need for economic growth. I want to thank you for allowing me to be here today, and I want to respectfully ask for everyone's vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dwire. We want to thank you both. It's not always easy putting yourselves and your families out there on the campaign trail, but we wish you well in the last 10 days of this campaign, and invite whoever the winner is back into the studio to always do interviews on Inside Government. We want to thank Jeremy Boyer for his thoughtful questions over the last hour. He has done this for the last 6 or 7 years, and we appreciate his time and effort. We also want to thank the studio staff here, as well as Mike, our timer, and all the rest of the students here. And more importantly, we want to thank you for taking the time over the last hour to listen to the 2 candidates for the 126th Assembly District. This forum will be shown not only on Time Warner and hopefully on FiOS, it'll be on the citizensauburnpub.com website starting tonight, and it'll be played on Saturday morning on 89.1, the college's radio station. We'll be back on Tuesday with our last of our campaign-themed shows. We'll have the candidates for Cayuga County Coroner, Adam Duckett and Steve Pelk. They'll be in here, followed by an edition of Inside Government with Auburn Superintendent of Schools, Constance Evelyn, who will be talking about not only the new school year, but we'll ask her about the Smart Schools Bond Act. That's one of 3 referendums that are on the ballot this November. And then we'll finish up with a discussion on Beyond the Front Page with the folks here from the Telecom Department. You can send your thoughts and questions to us at cozguytho@aol.com or Inside Government, P.O. Box 839, Auburn, New York. For Cayuga Community College and Time Warner Communications and the Citizen and FiOS, I'm Guy Cosentino. We hope you have a good night and have a great tomorrow, and more importantly, remember to go vote. And they'll tell us when we're out.